So the last episode of the third season of White Lotus concluded the other weekend, and while the fourth season is in renewal, it's going to be quite a wait until we actually see it back on HBO. And so in the meantime, you're probably wondering, well, what other shows or books are similar to White Lotus that I can consume? Well, I have compiled a list of about 7 books that I think are White Lotus-esque. Now, most of the books that I have found on some of these lists that came out, including the New York Times, tended to more commercial fiction like airport thriller novels. And because I am a bit of a literary snob, I decided to make my own list compiled from a couple suggestions of others of more literary fiction novels that still deal with marital woes, tourists traveling in resorts and behaving badly, spirituality, the meaning of life, and unique locations. So, if any of that sounds interesting to you, stick around and we will get started. The first book I found literally describes itself as being influenced by White Lotus. I believe that's what the author said. It is called The Sleepwalkers by Scarlett Thomas. It is described as Patricia Highsmith meets White Lotus in this surprising and suspenseful modern Gothic story following a couple running from both secretive pasts and very present dangers while honeymooning on a Greek island. Still reeling from the chaos of their wedding, Evelyn and Richard arrive on a tiny Greek island for their honeymoon. It's the end of the season and a storm is imminent. Determined to make the best of it, they check into the sun-soaked doors of the Villa Rosa, already feeling insecure after seeing the beautiful people, the endless number of young models and musicians lounging along the Mediterranean. Evelyn is wary of the hotel's owner, Isabella, who seems to only have eyes for Richard. Exhilarating, suspenseful, and also very funny, The Sleepwalkers asks urgent questions about relationships, sexuality, and the darkest elements of contemporary society, where our most terrible secrets are hidden in plain sight. That does sound very White Lotus-esque, so that is definitely going on my TBR, and it was just released, I think, last year, April of 2024. The next book that I found that I actually own, and it is Hotel du Lac by Anita Brookner. I read this about 15 years ago, and I don't remember any of it. So I do plan to reread this at some point because I do like to reread my collection and see if I still want to keep it. But Anita Brookner was really good about writing about solitary women and their loneliness. That's what I remember most about her work, what I have read. This specifically, yes, it won her the Booker Prize, by the way. Anita Brookner finds a new vocabulary for framing the eternal question, why love? It tells the story of Edith Hope, who writes romance novels under a pseudonym. When her life begins to resemble the plots of her own novels, however, Edith flees to Switzerland, where the quiet luxury of the Hotel du Lac promises to restore her to her senses. But instead of peace and rest, Edith finds herself sequestered at the hotel with an assortment of love's casualties and exiles. She also attracts the attention of a worldly man determined to release her unused capacity for mischief and pleasure. Beautifully observed, witheringly funny, Hotel du Lac is Brookner at her most stylish and potentially subversive. So if you want a Booker Prize, I think this is like one of the only books on this list that did win the Booker Prize. Then yeah, I don't really remember this, but it does sound interesting and I will have to reread it. The next book that I came across that was described as being White Lotus-esque, although this might be more, not so much literary, I think it is a little more commercial, is The Pink Hotel by Liska Jacobs. Newlyweds Kit and Keith Collins can hardly believe their luck when the general manager of the iconic opulent Pink Hotel invites them to come for a luxurious stay in a bid to hire Keith. Kit loves their small town life, but Keith has always wanted more, and the glittering, lily-scented lobby makes him feel right at home. So this takes place in Los Angeles, and apparently they end up getting confined there. It says Los Angeles becomes a pressure cooker with riots breaking out across the city amid rolling blackouts. I wonder what era this is supposed to take place. Pink Hotel closes its doors to outsiders, and Keith and Kit find themselves confined with an anxious, disgruntled staff and a growing roster of eccentric, ultra-wealthy, dangerously idle guests who flock to the hotel for sanctuary, company, and entertainment. It says Liska Jacobs explores the corrosive nature of greed and interrogates the notion of true love while hurtling readers towards certain disaster. Also sounds very White Lotus-esque. So, yeah, I probably will read this. It's not rated too well on Goodreads. It only got 2.94, so I don't know what that's about. But I have read... Sometimes Goodreads is just not accurate with the reviews if it was marketed as something and people were expecting something else. So that could be what's going on there. The next book that I think sounds White Lotus-esque and takes place in Thailand, which is where the third season took place, is Sightseeing by Rattawut Lapcharoensap. This was actually published in 2004, and it is a collection of short stories set in contemporary Thailand, written with a grace and sophistication that belie the age of its young author. Okay, cool. It says, Rattawut Lapcharoensap offers a diverse and humorous, deeply affectionate view of life in a small Southeast Asian country that is inevitably absorbing the waves of encroaching westernization. In the prize-winning story, Farangs, a young son of a modest beachside motel owner, commits the cardinal sin of falling for a pretty tourist, and the confrontation that ensues between the native boy and the girl's pompous American boyfriend culminates wondrously amid flying mangoes and Clint Eastwood, a pet pig, swimming out to sea. Sounds pretty bizarre. So I guess this deals with a mixture of both tourists, at least the first story, and as well as native Thai people. So I wanted to platform a Thai author. He's Thai American, but he says he spends time between Bangkok and Brooklyn because I feel like in the Western world, we don't really, when we read about Thailand, it's usually told from like a Western tourist perspective, and often in this weird like fetishization way, like men talking about like sex tourism or something like that. So I saw this and I actually was like, ooh, I do want to read this, but it definitely also sounds very White Lotus-esque. The next book I am going to talk about is another Thai author. It is called Bangkok Wakes to Rain by Pitchaya Sudbanthad. Hope that's how you say it. It says, a house in Bangkok is the confluence of lives shaped by upheaval, memory, and the lure of home. So I think that this is a novel, it is a novel. It says, so a missionary doctor pines for his native New England, even as he succumbs to the vibrant chaos of 19th century Siam. Okay, so this is a historical fiction piece. A post-World War II society woman marries, mothers, and holds court, little suspecting her solitary future. A jazz pianist in the age of rock, haunted by his own ghost, is summoned to appease the residential spirits. So I think it's a novel, but it's like a novel that I guess skips around in time and all takes place within this particular house in Bangkok. It literally says novel, but these are stories, so it must just be a novel, like a collection of stories that are all like mixed into a novel. The next book I am going to be mentioning is by a Sri Lankan author. I think this won the Booker, or it was shortlisted for the Booker. I never heard of it until I was actually researching this video. And it's called The Seven Moons of Maali, Almeida by Shehan Karunatilaka. I apologize for not saying some of these names correctly. This takes place in Sri Lanka in 1990, and a man called Maali Almeida, he's a war photographer, a gambler, and a closet queen. Okay? And that's literally what it says on Goodreads. He's woken up dead in what seems like a celestial visa office. His dismembered body is sinking into the serene Biera Lake, and he has no idea who killed him. In a country where scores are settled by death squads, suicide bombers, and hired goons, the list of suspects is depressingly long, as the ghouls and ghosts with grudges who cluster round can attest. But even in the afterlife, time is running out for Maali. He has 7 moons to contact the man and woman he loves most and lead them to the photos that will rock Sri Lanka. So this was, I think, listed in, I saw actually something that people said this was similar to White Lotus. And I actually think this is very similar to the third season specifically, because the last season in Thailand deals a lot with death and spirituality and rebirth, and incorporates, I think, like, one of the characters, she's really into Buddhism and she wants to study Buddhism in a monastery. So yeah, I think that this is pretty similar, in kind of a similar vein. The last book I wanted to talk about is something I am just going to add myself, and it is called My Husband by Maud Ventura. It is a translation from French, and this is about it doesn't take place on vacation in a resort, but it deals with a 40-something married woman, and she has a seemingly perfect life, but she is an obsessive, and she is apparently obsessed with her husband, and she analyzes every little detail about their relationship, looking for things and picking it apart, and like scrutinizing the most minute details. But one day it says she may have gone too far. And so I think that is kind of similar to some of the themes that were touched on in the first, I would say the second season, more so in Italy, where we deal with couples and questions of love and desire and all that kind of stuff. So I do want to read this at some point. But yeah, those are all the books I have compiled from various lists, as well as a couple suggestions of my own that I think deal with some similar themes and motifs that White Lotus does. So yeah, if you have any suggestions yourself that you think are White Lotus-esque, or you're a fan of the show, please leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, and yeah, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.